The hum of the engines was deafening in the control room, vibrating through the walls like a living thing. Captain Mira Sato stood at the front, her hands clenched against the smooth console, eyes fixed on the hollow screen that displayed the approaching fleet. The silence between her and her crew was unbearable, only the faint, mechanical whir of the ship filling the space. 30 seconds to intercept, Captain, the communications officer, Lieutenant Jovan, called out. His voice was tight with anxiety, his face pale under the flickering lights. Mira didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. They all knew what was coming. Her heart, cold with the weight of responsibility, thrummed in her chest, steady and fierce. But her mind was racing. The thought of losing another crew, of facing the unknown again, gnawed at her. Her fingers tapped rhythmically on the console. All hands brace for impact, she ordered. The words were simple, but they carried a weight, one that pressed down hard on her chest. It wasn't fear. Not for herself. But for the crew, for humanity. For Earth. Outside the viewport, the stars were growing dimmer. A fleet of alien warships, sleek and black like the void itself, glided closer, their weapons primed. The Kolossian Empire. An unstoppable force. The first wave was coming. And they had made it clear, Earth was their target. Captain, the fleet is hailing us. Jovan's voice broke through her thoughts. She glanced over at him, then back at the hollow screen. A transmission blinked into existence. Paragon, their leader, a massive, shadowy figure draped in dark armor, his eyes glowing with cold intelligence. He stared directly at the screen, his presence overwhelming even through the holographic projection. Earth's final moments are near, Captain. Paragon's voice boomed, his tone smooth, almost bored. Your people never learn. Mira's fingers clenched tighter around the console. We're not going down without a fight, Paragon. He chuckled, a low sound that echoed through the comms, unsettling and cold. Such noble arrogance. It will be your undoing. Do you truly believe your people can stand against us? Mira's jaw tightened. We've faced worse than you before. And we've always fought back. Paragon's expression darkened. Not this time, Captain. You will regret defying us. The transmission cut off, leaving the crew in a taut silence. Captain, Jovan said, his voice trembling slightly. They're already locking their weapons on us. We won't survive a full assault from this fleet. The shields won't hold. Mira exhaled slowly, keeping her focus. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. The moment they fire, we scatter. We don't give them a target. Her orders were calm, but inside, she was already calculating every possible outcome. The Colossians had done their research. They knew Earth's defenses were outdated, that humanity was barely holding on after years of conflict. But they underestimated one thing: humanity's spirit. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the other ships in the fleet. Jovan continued, his voice tinged with a glimmer of hope. They are ready to join the fight. Mira turned towards him, her face hardening. What's the status on the rest of the fleet? Are they in position? Yes, Captain. The Eastern Alliance, the remnants of the Mars Expeditionary Force, and a few scattered resistance fleets. They're holding their ground, waiting for your signal. Good, Mira replied, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. We fight as one. We'll show them that Earth isn't some colony to be erased. She turned back to the viewport. The Colossian fleet was nearly upon them. Massive warships, each one larger than anything the human fleet could match. They were ships of destruction, pushing through the dark abyss like predators circling their prey. Launch all fighter squads. We buy as much time as we can. Her voice was low but firm, the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. The crew moved without question. She knew what they faced. They all did. The first blast hit them hard, shaking the ship. The shields flickered but held, a flicker of defiance against the overwhelming force. The sound of the impact reverberated through the hull. Mira felt it in her bones. We're not done yet, she muttered under her breath. Her ship lurched again, but this time, it wasn't the blast of an alien weapon. It was the sharp, Immediate sound of their fighter squadrons launching from the bays, human-made ships, scrappy and fast, diving into the oncoming chaos. She watched them on the hollow screen, little specks darting against the backdrop of a vast, uncaring void. The fighters, despite being outmatched, fought like they had everything to prove. They dove into the Colossian fleet, weaving between firestorms, taking down the first wave of enemies with precision and speed. It wasn't much, but it was something. All units in position, Jovan reported. We're launching the counteroffensive now, Captain. Mira felt a surge of adrenaline. She didn't hesitate. Launch the main cannon. It's our only shot. The cannon fired, a beam of blinding blue light slicing through the darkness. For a moment it looked like it might work, like they might have a chance. But then, the Colossians retaliated, sending a wave of energy that disintegrated the attacking beam mid-flight. Mira's heart sank, but she didn't flinch. Focus fire on their lead ships. We're not done yet. As the battle continued to rage around them, she saw something that gave her a flicker of hope. The Colossian ships weren't as perfect as they seemed. They made mistakes, shifting too quickly, their weapons overextending. They hadn't anticipated humanity's refusal to give up, even when all seemed lost. Mira took a deep breath, steadying herself. This is just the beginning, she muttered, her eyes locked on the oncoming swarm. We will make them regret underestimating us. And just like that, the spark of rebellion ignited. The fight for Earth had begun. The battle raged on, a cacophony of explosions and laser fire cutting through the black sky. Mira stood at the helm, her knuckles white on the console. The ship jolted under another blast, a shudder that ran deep into her bones. The Colossians had come prepared. They were not just invaders, they were predators, and their tactics had a singular purpose: to destroy. Captain? Jovan's voice cracked through the comms, trembling with urgency. We're losing more fighters. The Colossian fleet is adapting faster than we anticipated. We can't outgun them. Mira didn't answer at first. She stared at the hollow screen, the flashing red dots marking the positions of her fleet's remaining ships. A dozen fighters had been destroyed in the last few minutes, their vapor trails burning out against the stars. But the worst part wasn't the losses. It was the knowledge that they were being outclassed in every way. Technology, numbers, and strategy, everything the Colossians possessed was superior. And yet humanity fought on. Reinforcements are coming, she finally said, her voice strained but resolute. We just need to hold on a little longer. A thick silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the distant thrum of the engines and the crackling static from the comms. Mira could feel it, the weight of every life on board, each one of her crew silently willing the ship to survive. But she knew none of it would be enough if they couldn't break through the Colossians' overwhelming advantage. Captain, enemy fleet is shifting its formation, Jovan reported again, his voice clipped. They're pushing for a direct assault on the inner defense ring. If they break through, we won't let them, Mira snapped. She clenched her jaw, fighting the rising tide of panic threatening to swallow her. All units lock on to their flagship. We need to disable their command ship. It's our only chance. The ship's engines roared as they veered sharply to the left, dodging a barrage of Colossian energy blasts. Mira's heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was clear. They had one shot at this. One chance to turn the tide. Captain? Jovan shouted, his voice rising with alarm. There's something else. Before he could finish, a new transmission flooded the comms. The hollow screen blinked, and Paragon's looming face filled the display once again. This time, he was not alone. Behind him, a massive fleet carrier floated, hundreds of smaller warships docked like parasites. You think you can defeat us, Captain? Paragon's voice was cold, but now, there was a hint of amusement, a cruel edge. You're fighting a battle you can't win. Mira held his gaze, her chest tightening. I've fought battles you wouldn't even understand, Paragon, she said, her voice steady. And I'll win this one too. Paragon's smile faltered for a split second, and Mira saw it, his hesitation. The Colossians weren't used to this. Humans who refused to bend, who fought when the odds were impossible. It was something they had never encountered before, and in that brief moment, she saw the tiniest spark of doubt in Paragon's cold eyes. "We shall see, Captain," he replied. "You will learn the true cost of defiance." The transmission cut, and the hum of the engines filled the silence again. "Focus fire on their flagship," Mira commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. "Full power to the weapons systems. We're going to take down their command ship, or we die trying." Her hands moved with practiced precision, pressing a series of buttons, adjusting the targeting systems. But deep down, a sinking feeling settled in her gut. The Kolossian flagship wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress, a mobile stronghold with firepower they had no hope of matching. She knew it was a gamble, but it was the only option left. Outside, the sky exploded with energy as her fleet fired back with everything they had. The blasts lit up the darkness, cutting through the enemy's ships in moments, but the Kolossian fleet was too vast. For every ship that fell, 2 more took its place, stronger, faster. "Enemy shields at 40%, Jovan reported, his voice strained. "We're getting through, but they're regenerating faster than we can hit them." Mira gritted her teeth. She was losing faith in the mission, in the plan. No matter how hard they fought, the enemy was relentless. The Colossians didn't just fight to win, they fought to erase, to destroy completely. "We need to buy more time," Mira muttered. "Tell the fleet to fall back to the next staging point. We'll regroup and try again. There's no shame in retreat if it means we can come back and finish this." "Understood, Captain," Jovan said quietly, his voice thick with frustration. But before he could issue the command, the ship lurched violently. Mira's stomach dropped as she gripped the console. The ship's hull groaned under the strain, the alarms blaring in a chorus of warning signals. "Status report," Mira barked. "We've lost the outer shields. Enemy ships have breached our perimeter," the tactical officer shouted. "We're surrounded, Captain. The Colossians are boarding." Mira's blood ran cold. "Prepare for hand-to-hand combat. Get the weapons systems online. We're not letting them take this ship." But as she turned to issue more orders, a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, we've got incoming reinforcements, but it's not from our fleet." Jovan's face paled as he stared at the incoming transmission. Mira's heart skipped. Could it be? Before she could respond, the screen flickered, and a new ship appeared. It wasn't human. "Who are you?" Mira demanded, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. The figure on the screen was tall, cloaked in dark robes. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and their voice was raspy, ancient. "We are the New York Ron," the figure said, "and we have been watching you, Earth. Now you will see why no one dares to challenge the Colossians." Mira's pulse quickened. The New York Ron? An ancient race thought to be extinct. Their sudden appearance sent a shockwave through her, and a sense of dread filled her chest. "Prepare yourselves," the figure warned. "This war is far from over." And with that, the transmission cut. For the first time since the battle began, Mira felt a cold, paralyzing fear. Something much darker had entered the fight, and she wasn't sure her fleet could survive it. The descent into chaos had only just begun. The battle was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a desperate, frantic struggle against an overwhelming force, one that seemed to adapt to every move, every strategy, every plan. Mira stood at the helm, watching as her fleet was slowly, methodically, torn apart. Her ship was battered, the shields barely holding, and the screams of dying crew members echoed in her mind even as the outside world continued to rage with fire and destruction. "Captain, we've lost communications with half of the fleet." Jovan's voice rang out, panic barely contained. "We're isolated. The Colossians are closing in." Mira didn't respond. She couldn't afford to. Each second that passed felt like an eternity. Her mind raced as she assessed their dwindling options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by an alien force that had no mercy, no hesitation. The New York Ron, those strange new allies, had been silent since their last message. The once hopeful arrival of reinforcement now felt like a distant dream, slipping away into the void. Enemy flagship is preparing for a direct strike on our position, the tactical officer announced, his voice breaking with the weight of the news. Mira's chest tightened. She had been expecting this, but hearing it confirmed made it all too real. Ready the countermeasures, she ordered, her voice low and steady despite the storm inside. Get those engines primed for evasive action. If they hit us directly, we're done. Her crew moved quickly, but there was an edge to their actions now, an edge of fear, of resignation. It was in the way they glanced at each other, in the way their movements seemed to slow under the weight of knowing how little time they had left. We've got one chance to make this count, Mira muttered more to herself than anyone else. We either make them regret this, or we die trying. Captain, Jovan called again, his tone more urgent this time. We're picking up something strange. A large energy signature. It's coming from the New York-run ship. Mira turned toward him, her heart skipping. What do you mean, strange? Is it a weapon? I don't know, Jovan replied. It's too massive to be anything we've seen before. It could be some kind of energy field. Or a trap, Mira said quietly. She knew they couldn't trust the New York run. They were an unknown quantity. But at this point, she had no choice. Redirect all power to the forward shields. We need to survive long enough to figure out what that energy signature is. But as she gave the order, her heart sank. She had been hoping for something, anything, that could turn the tide, but the situation was worsening faster than anyone could handle. A series of explosions rang through the ship, shaking it violently. Mira had to grip the edge of the console to keep from being thrown off balance. Status report, she shouted over the roar of the chaos. Shields down to 20%. Hull integrity failing, the damage control officer yelled. We're taking heavy fire. Captain, we can't hold on much longer, Jovan said, desperation creeping into his voice. Mira didn't want to hear it. She couldn't. We're not finished yet, she snapped. I need a plan to counter their flagship. Focus all fire on its central core. I want every last ounce of firepower we have aimed directly at that ship. Her crew scrambled, their fingers flying over the controls, but there was something in the air now, something heavy. The Colossians were relentless, their ships closing in with terrifying precision. It wasn't just a battle anymore, it was a game of attrition, and humanity was losing. The Colossian flagship fired first, massive, deadly bolts of energy that split the sky and rained down upon Mira's ship with unrelenting force. The shockwaves hit them like a physical blow, rattling the ship to its core. Mira gritted her teeth, refusing to let the wave of panic that rose in her chest take control. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Jovan, keep me updated on their movements. Before he could respond, another explosion rocked the ship, and the lights flickered, plunging the bridge into a temporary darkness. For a split second, Mira's heart skipped, and she felt the terrifying stillness of the void, just before the crushing wave of reality hit her. They were out of time. Shields are failing, the tactical officer screamed, barely audible over the alarms. We can't hold them off much longer. The ship trembled again, a fierce, gut-wrenching vibration that made Mira feel like her very bones were about to crack. She glanced at the tactical readout. They were down to nothing, no shields, no time. The Colossians had them cornered. And the New York-run ship? Still no sign of their supposed reinforcements. Do it now, Mira said, voice hoarse. Focus all energy on the main cannon. We either destroy their flagship or we die here. The crew hesitated for a moment, long enough for Mira to feel the weight of their fear. But then they moved. They had no other choice. A brilliant, deafening flash erupted as the cannon fired, a beam of light cutting through the darkness, streaking toward the Colossian flagship. For a heartbeat, Mira thought it might work. The beam struck the flagship's central core, and the ship seemed to stagger, its massive form shuddering violently. But then, a force field flared up around it, absorbing the impact with terrifying efficiency. No! Jovan shouted, his voice filled with despair. It's absorbing the energy. It's not even scratching them. Mira's fists clenched. This was it. They were out of options. The Colossians had won. Then, as if responding to her thoughts, a new voice cut through the comms. Low, powerful, alien. We have arrived. Mira froze, her breath catching in her throat. The New York ran. The ship on the holoscreen flickered, revealing the massive energy signature that had been building, an immense swirling mass of energy that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The New York run vessel unleashed it in a wave, a shockwave that collided with the Colossian fleet with cataclysmic force. The Colossian flagship staggered, its shields flickering, and Mira watched in awe as the New York run energy beam tore through their defensive perimeter. The Colossians had met their match. For the first time since the battle began, Mira saw a glimmer of hope. But that hope was fleeting. As the Colossians reeled, another enemy emerged from the shadows, far darker, far more menacing than anything they had faced. The New York run weren't their salvation. They were just another threat. Mira's heart sank. The breaking point had come. And the real war was only just beginning. The ship shook violently as the New York run energy wave collided with the Colossian flagship, sending a shockwave that reverberated through Mira's bones. For a moment she dared to believe, dared to hope, that this would be the turning point. But the brief flicker of triumph was quickly extinguished as the Colossian ships regrouped. They weren't retreating. They were adapting. Captain, they've reinforced their shields. It's like they've learned from the New York run energy pulse. Jovan's voice cracked over the comms, disbelief coloring his tone. It's as if they're evolving. Mira's stomach dropped. How is that possible? We've thrown everything we have at them. The Colossian flagship shield shimmered brighter, a barrier now pulsing with an unsettling rhythm. Mira watched helplessly as their formation tightened, focusing on her ship and the remnants of her fleet. The Colossians weren't just fighting, they were studying, analyzing. Her crew was falling silent, realizing the same grim truth. There was no more time. There was no way to survive unless they made a final stand. She felt the weight of their gazes on her, and she knew what they were all thinking. The New York run had been nothing more than an illusion. A false hope. Mira's mind raced. The Colossians had underestimated humanity's tenacity, but what had she done to prove they were worth saving? The same thing she had always done: fight, resist, refuse to go quietly into the night. But even now, with the last remnants of their fleet scattered like dust in the wind, something inside her sparked. Humanity had done the impossible before. They weren't invincible, but they had a force no one could comprehend. Heart. Get me a direct connection to the New York run ship, Mira ordered, her voice firm despite the horror clawing at the edges of her mind. Now. A few tense seconds passed before the figure from the New York run ship appeared on the screen. His alien face was illuminated by the ghostly light of their ship's core. His expression was unreadable. Mira's hands trembled, but she didn't let it show. We need to end this. We can't win alone, she said, her words heavy, laden with frustration. What do you want from us? You brought us here, and now. You misunderstand, Captain, the New York run said, his voice rasping. This is not your fight to win. It is a war that spans the stars. You are but a pawn in this game. There is no salvation for you. Mira's heart beat faster. Then why are you here? Why give us false hope? The New York run tilted his head slightly, as if contemplating her question. Your species, he said, almost in amusement. You think you can change fate? You will learn that some battles are not for you to fight. The Colossians are only the beginning. They will consume this galaxy, and you will be but a fleeting memory. Then why didn't you just let them kill us? Mira demanded. Why drag us into this war if you had no intention of helping us? For the first time, the New York run seemed to consider the question seriously. His gaze hardened, something deeper flickering in his otherworldly eyes. Because you have potential. But potential alone is nothing. It must be harnessed. A deep, gut-wrenching realization gripped Mira. The New York-Ron were watching them, studying humanity, not to help, but to evaluate. To see if they could be manipulated into something more than just survivors. The New York-Ron spoke again, his voice colder. Your species is divided, weak. If you want to survive, you must prove your worth. Not to me, but to the Colossians. Mira's blood ran cold. She didn't want to be their pawn. But in that moment, with the Colossian fleet tightening its grip, she realized the bitter truth. The war was no longer hers to control. If they were to survive, they would have to fight not just for their lives, but for their future. Against impossible odds. Against everything the galaxy had thrown at them. Mira turned to Jovan, the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. We fight until the last ship falls. We show them what humanity is made of. We're not just going to survive this, we're going to make them regret ever underestimating us. Jovan nodded, his eyes steely with resolve. Aye, Captain. For Earth. For humanity. Mira felt the spark inside her grow. She wasn't going to let the New York-Ron or the Colossians dictate humanity's fate. The time for fear was over. It was time for action. Initiate the final assault, Mira commanded. We take everything we have left, and we break through. We're going to give them a reason to fear us. The order rang out through the ship, and the crew moved quickly, methodically, with a single-minded focus. Even as the Colossian fleet moved in, their weapons primed to wipe them out in a single strike, Mira held her ground. There was no turning back. All fighters go. Full speed. Maximum firepower, she ordered. For Earth. The remaining fleet surged forward, their movements synchronized, their weapons flashing as they ripped through the Colossian forces. It wasn't much, but it was enough to force the Colossians into defensive positions. Mira's ship led the charge, firing the main cannon once more, unleashing the last of its energy in a devastating arc of light. For a moment, everything stood still. The Colossian fleet faltered, their shields finally cracking under the relentless assault. Mira felt her heart race, but she couldn't afford to relax. They were not done yet. This was just the beginning. Target their command ship, she shouted, her voice rising over the din. This ends now. The final barrage hit. The Colossian flagship shuddered, its shields flickering and collapsing. Mira watched, breath held, as the massive ship began to break apart, the sound of its destruction reverberating in the emptiness of space. And then, the unexpected happened. The Colossians, defeated, began to retreat. Their ships pulled back, abandoning their fallen flagship. The galaxy had just witnessed the first true victory of Earth in centuries. Mira stood in silence, watching as the stars around them settled into their cold, distant glow. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Captain! Jovan's voice broke the silence, his tone soft, almost reverent. We did it! Mira nodded, her expression unreadable. Yes. But we've only just begun. The victory was hollow. The Colossians would return. The New York-Ron had made that clear. But for the first time, humanity had something the rest of the galaxy could not predict, the strength to rise from the ashes. As Mira watched the wreckage of the Colossian fleet drift into the void, she knew one thing for certain: Earth would never surrender. The fight was far from over, but humanity's true power had only just been unleashed.